Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Megillah. We are up to Perek Bet Mishnah Dalid. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'erun Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Aranbayev Neriyahu ben Burcha Israelov Menuchatam Began Eden Amen, and Le'avdi ben Chaim Rechaim for the Refuah Shenemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa Betorsha Chole Israel. A person can fulfill his obligation to read the Megillah by hearing someone else read it. This Mishnah discusses who may read the Megillah for others. The Mishnah begins, Hakol kisherim nikrot et Megillah. All people are fit to read the Megillah for others. And the commentators explain all people includes women. Since they too were saved from Haman, they are just as obligated as men to read the Megillah. Chutz micheresh shoteh vekatan, except for a deaf person, an insane person, and a minor. Since these people are not obligated to read the Megillah, they cannot read it for those who are obligated. A deaf person is not obligated to read the Megillah because one who reads the Megillah must hear what he is reading. A deranged person and a minor are exempt from all mitzvot because they are not legally responsible for their actions. A different opinion about a minor. Rabbi Yehuda machshir bekatan. Rabbi Yehuda rules that a minor is fit to read the Megillah. Since the sages required minors to be trained to perform mitzvot, they too are obligated to read the Megillah, and they may read it for adults. Now, although children are not biblically obligated to fulfill mitzvot until they reach the age of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, the sages required that a child be trained to do mitzvot from the age of 9 or 10. As a rule, one who is rabbinically obligated to do a mitzvah can perform it on behalf of another who is also rabbinically obligated to do it, though not on behalf of someone who is biblically obligated. Since reading the Megillah is a rabbinic mitzvah even for adults, and since children are also rabbinically obligated to hear the Megillah under the requirement of training, Rabbi Yehuda rules that children are old enough to be trained can read the Megillah for adults. This is how the Gemara explains Rabbi Yehuda's position in Masechet Megillah, page 19b. The first Tan, however, holds that a child cannot read the Megillah for an adult because a child is obligated to a lesser degree. In contrast to an adult who is obligated to read the Megillah by one rabbinic law, a child is obligated to do so only because of a combination of two rabbinic laws, the rabbinic mitzvah of Megillah and the rabbinic requirement of training. So it can be said that an adult's obligation is just one step removed from biblical law, while a child's obligation is two steps removed from biblical law. Since a child's obligation is weaker in this sense than an adult's, a child cannot perform the mitzvah on behalf of an adult. And the Rav does tell us, the Halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the Halacha follows the opinion of the Tana Kama. The Mishnah now defines the earliest time in the morning for the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, as well as other mitzvot that must be performed in the daytime. And kohen et the Megillah, we may not read the Megillah, velo malin, or perform circumcision, velo tovlin, or immerse in a mikveh to be purified from tumah. Now this refers to a tameh person who must wait 7 days and immerse in a mikveh on the 7th day to become ta'or. For example, a zav, a mitzorah, or one who became impure from a corpse. This immersion must be done on the 7th day and not during the night preceding the 7th day. Velo mazin, we may not sprinkle mechatat, water mixed with ashes of a parah duma, to purify a person or utensils from the tumah of a corpse. Now a person or utensil that becomes tameh from a corpse must have mechatat sprinkled on him on the 3rd and 7th days of his 7 days. This procedure must be done during the daytime. Similarly, a woman who observes a day corresponding to a day may not immerse in a mikveh. A woman who has a discharge of blood for 1 or 2 days during a certain time frame between her regular menses is tameh zava. In order to become ta'or, she must remain free of discharge the next day and immerse in a mikveh. Such a woman is called shomeret yom keneged yom, one who observes a day corresponding to a day, meaning she must observe 1 day free of discharge to counter her 1 or 2 days of discharges. The Mishnah says they may not do any of these things until the sun has risen. Now, the verse that instructs us to read the Megillah uses the word v'hayamim and these days to teach that it must be read during the daytime. The word yom, day, is also written in connection with all the other activities that we listed here, requiring that they too be performed in the daytime. But in all of these cases, if one did the mitzvah after the first ray of dawn appeared, which occurs before sunrise, it is valid because that is when the day actually begins. Now, dawn begins when the first rays of light appear in the sky. Sunrise is the moment at which the sun begins to appear over the horizon. Since it's often hard to tell when dawn begins, the sages required one to wait until sunrise, which is easier to discern. But again, we said, if one did the mitzvah after the first ray of dawn appeared, which is before sunrise, it is valid because again, that is when the day actually begins. That is the end of Mishnah Daled. Mishnah Hay continues, Kol Yom Kasher Likret Megillah, the entire day is fit for reading the Megillah, meaning the daytime reading of the Megillah may be done at any time throughout Purim day until the night, as well as for these mitzvot, V'likriyat Halel, reciting the Halel on festivals, Rosh Chodesh and Chanukah, V'litkiyat Shofar, blowing the Shofar on Rosh Hashanah, V'nitilat Lulav, taking the Lulav on Sukkot, V'litfilat Musafin, saying the Musaf prayer on Shabbat, festivals and Rosh Chodesh, V'la Musafin, bringing the Musaf offerings on those occasions, because the Musaf offerings were special offerings brought on Shabbat, festivals and Rosh Chodesh. The Musaf prayer is also recited on these occasions. Ulviduya Parim, making the confession on the bull offerings. If a Kohen Gadol mistakenly ruled that a transgression punishable by karet is permitted and then committed that transgression, he must bring a bull as a chatat offering, what we call para Kohen Mashiach, the bull of the anointed Kohen. If the Sanhedrin made a similar mistake and then relying on that ruling, most of the nation committed the transgression, the Sanhedrin must also bring a bull as a chatat offering, what we call par Helem Davar Shetzibur, bull for a matter that was hidden from the community. And as part of the offerings service, the Kohen Gadol or Sanhedrin confesses the sin for which it was brought. Ulviduya Maaser, making the confession on Maaser. One who owns produce that grew in Eretz Yisrael is obligated to make a certain declaration on the last day of Pesach of the 4th and 7th years of the 7-year Shemitah cycle. He must declare that over the last 3 years he separated the required portions of Maaser and Terumah from his produce and dealt with them as required by law, and this is known as Vidu Maaser, the confession on Maaser. Ulvidu Yom Kippurim, making the confession on Yom Kippur, which refers to the confession said by the Kohen Gadol on the Yom Kippur offerings before he offers them. Lismicha, Lishchita, Litnufa, leaning on offerings, which in the case of most personal offerings, obligatory and voluntary, the owner leans down on the head of the animal before it is offered. This mitzvah is known as smicha, leaning, slaughtering them and waving them. Some offerings, including the shlamim, require tinufa, waving. The kohen, sometimes together with the owner, waves certain parts of the offering up and down in the 4 directions of the compass. Lehagasha, likmitza, ulaktara, bringing the vessels that hold the mincha offering to the altar, taking a fistful of the mincha, burning it on the altar. Now when bringing a mincha offering, the Kohen takes the vessel that holds the mincha and touches it against the corner of the altar. He then removes a portion of the mincha with a scoop formed by bending 3 of his fingers over his palm, which is kmitzah, and burns that portion on the altar. Limlika, slitting the neck of a bird offering, not to slaughter a bird offering. The Kohen slits its neck with his fingernail, process known as milika, slitting. Kabbalah, ulazaya, receiving the blood of an offering in a vessel, sprinkling it on the altar. The blood that spurts from an animal upon its slaughter is caught in a vessel and then applied to the altar. Ulashkeat sota, making a sota drink the bitter waters. A sota is a woman suspected of adultery. If she was warned by her husband not to be secluded with a certain man and she disobeys his warning, she and her husband are not allowed to live together unless she drinks the bitter waters, which prove her guilt or innocence. These bitter waters consist of sacred water mixed with earth from the temple floor, into which a scroll containing the name of God has been dissolved. V'la'arifat ha'egla, beheading the calf, the egla rufa. If a person is found murdered in a field, the elders of the nearest city must behead a calf and declare that they bear no responsibility for the murder. The calf is called an egla rufa, beheaded calf. Ulatarat mitzorah, and purifying the mitzorah. A mitzorah is a person who's contracted tzarat, a certain type of skin affliction. He is tameh until the affliction heals, and he goes through an 8-day purification process. On the first day, he participates in a ritual that involves the use of 2 birds. The Torah uses the word yom, day, in connection with all the activities listed here, teaching that they may be performed at any point in the daytime, but not after nightfall, as the Gemara explains, Masechet Megillah, page 20b through 21a. And the activities listed in the previous Mishnah, which was circumcision, immersion, and sprinkling mechatat, are included in this rule as well, and they may be performed at any time throughout the day until night. Likewise, the law mentioned in that Mishnah that daytime mitzvot may not be done before dawn also applies to the activities that are listed here. And that is an abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.